Pipe, and I'm the author of Twisted Tainted Tales, which is my debut short story horror collection. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to Brad for inviting me to read a story on his channel. And I think I should probably just say that I'm just getting over COVID at the moment as well. So if I'm a bit croaky and look a bit like a zombie, then that's the reason why. But thank you ever so much for listening. This is number 11, track 11 in the book, and it's called Running with the Devil. Have you ever had an experience that frightened you so much you don't know whether you can ever bring yourself to discuss it? That somehow to speak of it might make the event happen all over again? That is how I should feel about the legend of Trent Barrow. Although let me tell you this straight up, it sure as hell is not a fucking legend. It started many years ago when I was just a kid. I lived with my parents in a small rural town in the county of Somerset. It was the 80s and life was pretty sweet. Get up, go to school, come home, play outside, in for tea, back out into bedtime, where you slept like a log, ready to do it all again tomorrow. Bliss. My parents were pretty cool. I was brought up watching crime TV shows and reading horror. Our bookshelves were lined with Stephen King, M.R. James and Edgar Allan Poe. Listening to my dad tell me ghost stories was the thing I loved the most. For as long as I can remember, he would sit me on his knee and recount the various lore and legends of the local area. He had grown up in the neighbouring county, Dorset, and had many chilling and exciting stories to entrance me with. Some, I later realised, were tales borrowed from the classics, such as The Telltale Heart. But many others, he'll swear to this day, were true. Things he'd seen with his own eyes. And one particular tale, when he told me over and over, could not possibly be fabricated. This was the tale of Trent Barrow. My dad told me that once a year, appropriately on All Hallows Eve, a phantom coach and horses would manifest racing through the Barrow. Then tragedy would strike, and the coach would plummet into the lake, disappearing until the next year. The legend said the coach had been returning from a ball when the horses were spooked and bolted towards the water. The entire party and horses disappeared into a bottomless pit and were never seen again, until the anniversary the following year, where the ghostly carriage returned to relive their catastrophic accident. I would listen with chills running down my spine when my dad told me that one year, when he was a teenager back in the 60s, he and a few of his mates decided to head down to the supposed location and see if they could witness anything. Well, around 11:30 p.m, Dad and another lad chickened out and headed home, but their other mate, a stubborn sort, said there's no way he was being a pussy, so he stayed. Dad and his mate went to see that friend the next day. There was no answer at his house, no sign of life inside. The phone line just rang and rang. Eventually, after 4 days, his mum answered the door. Looking upset and angry, she called to Derek. As he came down the stairs, my dad gasped in shock. Although Derek was only 17 years old and just 4 days ago had long jet black greaser-style hair, it was now brilliant white. He never told them exactly what he saw that night. All they ever knew was that he had been so frightened his hair had lost all of its pigmentation. It blew my tiny mind. Being my favourite story, I made my dad tell it over and over, especially as it neared Halloween each year. I never bored of it. I was fascinated with the idea of the carriage just disappearing. I created my own versions of the tale, injecting personalities into the victims inside the coach. There was an elderly couple with their debutante, beautiful but mute granddaughter, and a mysterious young bachelor who wore his cloak high, covering his face. I may have been thinking of highwaymen, but it didn't matter. The coachmen were brothers, both supporting wives and many children, having taken over the family business from their father once he'd passed. I never forgot the legend. As I grew, Halloween became more about parties and scary movie marathons than trick-or-treating and stories, about dares and stupidity, scares and flirting, and most importantly, a boy. It's always a boy, right? It was 1996. I was 16 and in love. It's always love when you're that age. We were both in year 11 at school, and I'd have done anything for him. Even attend a party on Halloween at his cousin's house, who lived a couple of towns over. Near Trent Barrow, in fact. It dawned on me this may well be a ruse to encourage an outing over to the site of the bottomless pit, and I asked him if there were any special plans for the evening. Looking at me with those baby blues, he swore it'd just be a bunch of kids from his cousin's school, and his aunt would probably make us bob for apples or some shit. His older cousin would then drive us home. I was torn. On one hand, a party with my beau sounded awesome, and like something that would give me endless bragging rights at school. Also, he hadn't said a word about any nighttime jollies. I didn't even know how close the house would be to the location. But on the other hand, I knew the story was true. Those horses would be dragging a ghostly carriage to its doom, and I wasn't sure I could be that close without finding a way to witness it for myself. The day of the party arrived. Fortuitously, Halloween was on a Friday, so my parents had agreed and given me a very special 1:30 a.m. curfew. They trusted Aaron and confirmed with his aunt that Luke's brother could drop us home. I've no idea how I managed double maths along with all the other mundane lessons when I was bubbling over with excitement. As predicted, the other girls were mad with jealousy. Aaron was one of the most popular boys in our year, and I was already the object of envy. Attending a party of an older crowd in another town was the creme de la creme of coolness. By the time I arrived home from school, nerves as well as excitement had begun to fester in my stomach. Although I adored Halloween, there was still that element of fright for me. It was, after all, the night where the veil between the worlds is at its thinnest, where ghosts and monsters are able to cross over. I felt a shiver of anticipation. I didn't think Aaron's cousin and friends would be so much into lore and legends as to watching Friday the 13th in Nightmare on Elm Street whilst drinking 2020 and sneaking Lambert and Butler ciggies. I imagined the only scary thing would be ensuring any other girls attending kept their eyes off my man. I just couldn't stop lamenting over how damn close we'd be to Trent Barrow, and on the night where the phantom coach would pass through. A car horn beeped. "Bye, Mum, I'll be home just after 1ish. Love you." I headed out to Aaron's dad's car, greeting him with a quick kiss as I slid into the back seat. He grinned, whispering into my ear, "I can't wait for this party, babe." Arriving at the house, I wasn't surprised to see a ton of kids already gathered outside, a lot of loud music being blasted through the speakers that had been rigged up in Luke's garden. "Tell Aunt Susan I want you guys home no later than 1:30 a.m, Aaron's dad reminded him. "Thanks, Mr. Shea," I called, closing the door behind me. "Dude!" Luke walked over to us, slapping Aaron on the shoulder and giving me a wink. "Grab a drink and have some fun." He nudged Aaron, making smoochy noises at us. Laughing, Aaron turned to me. "Real mature, huh?" He grinned apologetically. We held hands as he guided me to the kitchen and grabbed a couple of beers. He brought me close for a long kiss, and I felt completely relaxed. "Yo, peeps, everyone in the garden. It's scary story time. Wah-ha-ha." Dragging me outside, Aaron plonked us down on some rugs on the grass and wrapped his arms around me. I was definitely feeling the love tonight. The usual slumber party type stories were retold with various incarnations of Bloody Mary and the Hookman. I snuggled into Aaron, enjoying the atmosphere and feeling the buzz of the beer. "Jay, why don't you tell the one about the horses?" Luke called over to me. Now, I wasn't the most confident orator, but I did my best, engaging the others in the tale of the disappearing travellers. Every Halloween, just before midnight, it's said if you're standing on the exact spot in Trent Barrow Woods, you too will witness the ghostly horses and coach disappear into the bottomless pit and hear their everlasting screams. Feeling that shiver run down my spine again as I finished the tale, I was surprised to see my audience captivated, staring at me, a mix of wonder and excitement etched on their faces. "Trent Barrow Woods are just down the road, ain't they?" asked Jamie. "We should go and see the ghosties, woo!" laughed Dean. "You won't go, you pussy, you're way too chicken shit." What was happening? Did people actually want to go to the site of the accident and see for themselves if the apparition appeared? "Well," Aaron glanced down at me, "isn't this what you always wanted? You can tell your dad about it." My heart was pounding as I looked around. Jamie and Dean had been in the year above us and played football with Aaron. Jamie turned 17 a few months ago and borrowed his mum's Mini to drive to the party. Dean looked like he'd been helping himself to beers all night. I bit my lip. What was I waiting for? "Come on, eh?" Jamie called over. Aaron kissed my cheek and went to his mate, whispering something in his ear. Jamie slapped him on the back and announced, "To the Mini!" It felt wrong somehow, but my desire to at long last visit the location of the phantom coach superseded common sense. I agreed to tag along, my heart pounding. It was, of course, pitch black outside, being close to midnight in late October. Not knowing the exact rumoured location of the bottomless pits, we carefully wandered through the woods with torches until we found a stagnant pool of water. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for since I was a little girl, sat on my dad's knee. Looking at my watch, I shivered. 11:30 p.m. We were so close. Aaron, murmured Dean, "Oh, you need to go for a piss. I'll, head back towards the car for a few, mate. All right." I noticed Aaron smirk and wave his mate off. And then there were three. Jamie began pacing around, looking awkward. "You know what, mate? I'm going for a smoke. Back in 5. Frowning, I watched Jamie amble away too. Glancing at Aaron, I realised he didn't look too surprised. Was he expecting his mates to bottle it? Or, "Aaron," I began. "What's going on?" Turning, he pulled me close and pressed his lips to mine. We'd been together for a couple of months. It wasn't a surprise. He was always looking for a corner to sneak off for a snog. Returning the kiss, I felt his hand creep up my sweater. Again, not a shocker. He was always trying to cop a feel when he could. But this felt more urgent. Pushing me against the tree, he began to kiss my neck, his hand snaking from my bra to the waistband of my jeans. I could feel his hard-on pressing against my thigh. Now, don't get me wrong, we were 16 and had been going out for a while. I was pretty sure I loved him and was ready for whatever he was trying to instigate. But not up against the tree with his mates round the corner, and certainly not when I was about to witness the most important ghost sighting of my life. "Hang on there, lover," I responded to his urgency. We're here to see the phantom carriage and the legend my dad told us, remember? I somehow managed to twist my arm until I could see my watch again. 11:45 p.m. Struggling now, I batted his hand away from the zipper on my jeans. He was having none of it, his own jeans hanging around his knees, the front of his boxers tented. He was still using his weight to push me against the bark, which was starting to hurt. "Aaron," I cried, "back off, please." His breath was coming out hot and heavy. He was making noises, and for the first time, I felt a bit frightened. Tears began to fall as I realised what might be about to happen. Just as he started to fiddle with my belt, the temperature plummeted. It went from being a little chilly to literally being able to see our breath fogging out in front of us. "What the—" The sudden freeze seemed to distract him, at least momentarily. Taking my chance, I wriggled out of his grip and gave him a hard shove. "Dick," I yelled in his face, "what the actual fuck is wrong with you?" I'm not exactly sure what sort of response I was expecting. An apology? Embarrassment? Even anger, his lust ruling over his usually sensitive mind. What I did not envision was the look of pure terror etched upon his face. He was staring behind me, trousers still bunched around his knees, and I noticed a wet patch forming on his boxer shorts. But it wasn't from excitement. Aaron had pissed himself. Trembling, I dared to turn around to see what had caused such an extreme reaction. Part of me knew what I'd see. It was, after all, the very reason I was there. The legend. It came thundering towards us, clear as day. 4 beautiful white horses pulling a Dickensian-looking carriage. 2 coachmen sat atop, guiding the animals. A rumble of conversation came from inside. It roared towards us, and I could see a frown upon one of the coachmen. Then an attempt to steady the beasts who were galloping too fast. We heard a "whoa" there and a whinnying as the horses seemed to realise something was amiss. Now the look of pure panic upon both the drivers' faces, the frantic pulling of reins, then neighing, screaming, crashing, splashing, banging. Finally, silence. The phantom had reenacted its infamous journey right in front of our eyes, and it was so much worse than I ever could have imagined. Halloween night, 1899. The party at the Baron's country estate had been the usual frivolous affair, thanks to the young Baroness being a bit of a socialite, minus the scandal. Still, there was only so much dancing and apple cider one could manage, and Lady Margaret Winstanley was glad to see the clock ticking towards midnight. Like Cinderella, she felt sure she needed to be tucked up in her 4-posted bed by the time the bells tolled. Feeling most grateful, she gladly stepped into the awaiting carriage that would take her back to her estate via Trent Barrow. Davina Hamilton Weston, a 16-year-old debutante, felt the exact opposite from the spinster Winstanley. She had enjoyed a glorious night of dancing. Her card had been marked by every eligible bachelor present, making her father, Lord Hamilton Weston, most proud. She had been glad of the carriage's arrival, only as she was sure her feet to be covered in blisters. The young debutante, however, was especially pleased to see one last person board the coach before its departure. Rufus Brotherstone was a wealthy young bachelor, and, it was alleged, a bit of a cad. That, of course, didn't stop Davina from stealing a glance at him under her lashes. They had enjoyed a dance, and as he had led her breathlessly to the couch to rest after their jig, his hand had lingered a moment more than proper, causing her heart to flutter and cheeks to redden. He smiled as he sat opposite her, and she felt her young bosom rising in anticipation. The coach lurched as the horses began their journey, and she jolted forward. Allowing gravity to give her a little push, she bumped knees with the gentleman. "Davina!" her father reprimanded as she hurriedly scooted back to her proper seat, face burning. Knocking on the roof of his cane, Lord Hamilton Weston called out, "I say, chaps, do take it easy." "Sorry, sir," came the easy reply from one of the coachmen. "Mare got a bit spooked. Won't happen again." "Humph!" muttered Lady Winstanley into her handkerchief, thoroughly disgruntled by the jolt and disgusted by the obvious devilry occurring before her very eyes. It wasn't a long journey by coach back to their various estates, but the route would take them directly through the Barrow, which was apt to be a tad bumpy. Davina wished the horses would spook again, so she might accidentally fall into the lap of the young man opposite her. What a wicked thought! She ought to be punished for such brazenness. Staring surreptitiously at the debutante before him, Rufus Brotherstone felt a stirring in his loins, thankful it was covered by his thick winter overcoat. She was devastatingly beautiful. He must find a way to win her over, and deflower her. Shifting in his seat lest his intentions be known, he felt the coach shudder again beneath him. "Oh!" cried Lady Winstanley, as their comfortable transport began to rock a little. Then, out of nowhere, came a yell from the coachman, followed by a terrifying cacophony of noises from the horses. "Whoa there! Daddy?" asked Davina, feeling frightened. "What?" But she never got to finish her question. As the storm raged and the horses grew wilder, a strong gust of wind blew each of the coach doors open and ripped it away, leaving a gaping void with no protection from the elements. The mere humans inside were no match for the velocity of the wheels and ferocity of the weather. Lady Margaret Winstanley was flung out with such vigour that she barely felt the spike from the fallen tree impale her like a lollipop. As the coach spun, Davina Hamilton Weston, too, was tossed out like the winning caber and joined her fellow passenger on the ground. Alas, so great was the impact, it severed her spinal cord, and she was decapitated. Her head kept rolling until it reached the infamous pit. Lord Hamilton Weston had tried to be valiant and reach for his daughter as she flew into the abyss, but his own self-preservation kicked in, and he grabbed a hold of the opposite door whilst wailing in anguish. Upon seeing the fate of his only child, he let go of his stronghold for a moment, and was rewarded for his cowardice as the coach flipped, and he too was evacuated from the interior in an unceremonious fashion. Screaming helped none, and his body landed in a nearby tree. It took around 5 minutes of pure agony for him to choke to death and succumb to the broken neck. He had been hanged by his own fancy collar. The remaining passenger, Rufus Brotherstone, could only watch in terrified silence as the coach took its final spin and headed straight into the lake. The water began to seep into the carriage with ease, since there was no barrier, and he tried in desperation to pull himself out. However, his arm had been wedged beneath the seating, which was crushed in the fall, and he was trapped. By the time his lungs were filled, he was resigned to his watery death. I still love this story. Despite the scare it gave me, and Aaron turning out to be a complete bellend, it continues to give me joy. Apparently I've told it so many times the nurses know it off by heart. No matter, they come and go, so there's always a fresh pair of ears to bend. After all, they say I won't ever leave this place. Thank you again to Brad for allowing me to read this story for his Halloween special on his channel. And once again, that was The Legend of Trent Barrow from Tainted Tales. Thank you.